क्या गर्मी हो रही है यार बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अल्हम्दुलिल्लाहि रब्बिल आलमीन वस्सलातु वस्सलामु अला रसूलिल्लाहि व अला आलिहि व सहबिहि अजमईन रब्बि इश्रह ली सदरी व यस्सिर ली अमरी वहलुल उक़दतम मिन लिसानी यफ़क़हू क़ौली. Inshallah, in today's dars regarding the life of Umar al-Khattab radiyallahu an, we will continue our talk regarding the conquest of Iraq and the area east of Iraq, which was under the Persian Empire of that time. And I've mentioned this multiple times. When we talk about Persian Empire, we are basically talking about one of the superpowers of that time, in the time of, even in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and onward until the era of Umar al-Khattab, and Umar al-Khattab was the Khalifa al-Muslimin. This was the time when the decline of the Persian Empire was basically put to an end at that time. And so we were talking about how the Iraq came under Islam, and the people of Iraq, they entered into the folds of Islam as well. So last week we continued on from Qadisiyah, and we talked about some of the other conquests that happened after Qadisiyah, and we talked about Madain, and then after Madain we talked about Jalula, and the small other areas that came under Islam. They started gathering in an area called Nahawan. And that is referred as, when we look into the historical books, this is referred as a conquest of Nahawan, or it's also referred as conquest of conquest, or the Fathul Maftuh, that this is the victory of all the other victories that are coming in place. And the battle of Nahawan is referred as Ma'arakatul Nahawan. So today, inshallah, we'll talk about Ma'arakatul Nahawan, and some of the areas that we will not go into detail at all. We'll talk about which areas were open afterwards, after Nahawan. Because Nahawan was, as I said, is referred as Fathul Maftuh, the conquest of the conquests. Meaning, this was the kind of think of it as the final nail in the coffin of the Persian Empire. And afterwards, basically, there was just small uprisings happened here and there, or many of the treaties happened, and people came to the fold of Islam. So this battle of Nahawan that happened in the 21st year after the Hijrah, and the Persians, as we talked about, they were continuously moving towards the east. As they were losing, they started moving towards the east, and they were trying to keep gathering. And Nahawan was the last point where they were able to gather about the army of 150,000 soldiers. So it was a big army. Still, even after losing so many battles against the Muslims, they lost their own capital of that time, which is referred to as Al-Madain, or which is one big city, and there were many smaller cities. That's why it's called Madain, or the plural of Medina. Medina means the city. So that was as the biggest of the world at that time. At the time we are talking about when Muslims opened that land. Now, as this battle happened in the 21st year of Hijrah, and this is there was between the Qadisiyah and the Nahawan, there's about 4 years of difference. There are 4 years of gap, because Umar al-Khattab radiyallahu an, he ordered the Sahaba, when the Muslims reached to the mountains of Zagros or Zagros, to stop there and do not continue their fight afterwards, because Umar al-Khattab's instructions were to stabilize the areas that the Muslims have opened already. So stabilize the area, so the people who are under the Muslims, they can see Islam being implemented over them. And we saw the fruits of that. The people start entering into fold of Islam very quickly, when they saw the justice of Islam, when it was implemented over the land that were under the Muslims. Now, so after that, when the Persian Empire, the remains of the Persian Empire under Yazgir, the king of the Persians, they start gathering, and when they heard the news that the Persians have gathered to fight against the Muslims, the army of 150,000. So, he appointed Fayrazan as the commander over that army of 150,000, Yazgir. So a letter was sent to Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, to let him know what are the changes are happening around the state. Yes, they were ordered to stop the moving towards the east further when they reached the mountains of Zaghrus, but that was not it does not mean that when they are under attack, or if the Persians come back and they attack, they will just sit back. So they had to let the Khalifa know what is the situation and how the new things are unfolding. So they want to know the instructions from Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh. So they explain them what is happening. So Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, he assembled as usual. That was one of the things about Umar al-Khattab, that many of this kind of decisions that he made, he gathered the people. He did the shura. He consulted the Sahaba, because he still had many Sahaba from the Ansar and the Muhajirin. From some of them were even the ones who participated in Badr with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we talked about Qadisiyah, even there were many Sahaba from the Badr, many Sahaba from Sulh Hudaybiyah, the one who took the bay'ah to Rasulullah from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam under the tree, about whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised those people who gave the bay'ah to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The ones who participated in the Badr, they were the ones about which Rasulullah said Allah has forgiven them. They are the people of the Jannah, they are referred to them as. So now, these are the kind of people that he had around him still. Hence, he used to consult them to find out what they think of how to deal with this kind of situation that is coming up. And after consulting them, he gathered an army under the Sahabi named Nu'man ibn Muqarrin al-Muzni. So he gathered an army under him. He's the one who's leading the army, even though he was the governor or the wali of Kaskar. Kaskar was one of the areas the Muslims opened under the Persian Empire. And not only him, look, and this is, you will see, these are the governors. We think of them as, these are the real rulers of those areas. They are also leading armies. It's not that once they have taken a position, then they are not going to be participating in the army expeditions. We find even them, when there was a need, they even participated. And hence we find that Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh, he assigned him to be the one who would be leading the army, even though he was the governor of Kaskar. Of course, the cases where the governor has left the place where he was ruling, he would leave a person behind him to continue his tasks. Like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we find in many occasions when he left Medina, he left somebody to take care or to run the affairs of the Medina at that time. We find he left Ali radiallahu anh one point. We find Abdullah ibn Maktoum was left one time to take care of the affairs of the Medina, and so on and on. So similarly, we find the Sahaba are doing the similar kind of examples or following the examples of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course, they were from the best of the generation after Rasul, among the people. And as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said in one of the hadith, that Sahaba are the best of the generation. When we say best of the generation, as a whole, collectively, Sahaba were the best generation. Collectively, Sahaba would not agree on a mistake. They will not make a mistake collectively. This is why the Ijma' al-Sahaba is taken as one of the sources of the Hukum Shari, because Allah Azza wa Jalla mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is pleased with them and they are pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, as a single Sahabi, we can see a Sahabi as an individual, he is not ma'soom like the Prophets were. Prophets were ma'soom, they were infallible, they would not make mistakes. While when we talk about the Sahabi, an individual is different than collective. As a collective, they would not make a mistake. Meaning, if they all agree on something, they would not be making mistakes. Now, moving on. So Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh not only made him the Amir, but also he drew up a plan for this army that is going to be fighting against the Fayrazan, which was appointed as a leader by Yazdgar for the army of 150,000 of the Persians. So Nu'man ibn Muqarrin al-Muzani, which was who was the governor of Kaskar, he was appointed as, if you want to call him, commander-in-chief, or the one under whom the whole army was. While Hudayfa ibn Yaman was to be commander of the detachment drawn from the people of Kufa. So some people were taken from the Kufa. They are the one who were under Hudayfa ibn Yaman. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, who was the governor of Basra. See, as I said, governor of Kaskar, now governor of Basra, is Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. He was to be commander of detachment drawn from the people of Basra. So people who were taken from the Basra, meaning the army that entered into Basra, they are under Muslims. Now, from that part of the army, we're taking part of it. Similarly, Hudayfa ibn Yaman, he's taken part from the Kufa. And Salma ibn Qayyin, Hamala ibn Murayta, Zur ibn Kulayb, and Aswad al-Rabi' and other Muslim commanders who were in the Persian area, which were under Muslims. Their job was to make sure that the other Persians, they do not join the army of Al-Fayzan, because what Yazgard was doing, he was trying to gather the army from all across whatever was under his region. So their job was to keep those Persians distracted, so they are not able to join the army of Fayzan, Fayrazan. Now, Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, he wrote to the governors, the commanders with his instruction, and he managed to mobilize an army of some 30,000 Muslims. So compared to 150,000, it's still a small number. But 30,000 of its own, if you think about it, it's a pretty big number. Compared to, but as we talked about last week, we talked about that as when one of the leaders of the Persians, when he was talking to the Muslims, and he was with the Muslims, and he was saying that when you were under Jahiliyyah and we were not following Allah, then we always had the upper hand. Now you have Allah on your side. Hence, we cannot compete with you. So in response to that, the Muslim leader mentioned to the reply to him that in the Jahiliyyah, we were divided. Now under Islam, we are united. He's not saying, of course, the victory comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the common thread that we will find all those of the Muslim army, in general of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. This was very clear that yes, we will put all the efforts, but the victory comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not that thinking of their efforts are the one that results into victory. It's the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come when we deserve the victory. You know, I was just talking to some brothers about one of the bad, actually in the Qadisiyah also it happened when Rustam sent one of the spies to spy on the Muslim army. And when he returned back and replying to Rustam, he's saying to him, well, I did not see, he asked him, what do they eat? He said, I did not see them eating. But I saw them during the nighttime, they have a stick in their mouth, which is a miswak. They were using a miswak. And in the morning, they have the stick in their mouth. Okay, now, that's a separate story that when they had the stick in their mouth, this is a miswak they are doing, cleaning their teeth. That doesn't mean the Muslim army was fighting with miswak. Okay, because sometimes it's been given an impression to the people as if that as one of the battles has been mentioned many times about that Muslim army was trying to fight and they were not getting successful. Then they found out they have missed the sunnah of the miswak, and the moment they start doing the miswak, they won. Look, Allah knows the best about the authenticity of the story. That's a sunnah of its own, as it has its own results that has to be done. Miswak is not the one that is used to fight the enemy. You don't find Sahaba, you don't find even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best first, the one who is ma'asum, who's infallible. He made all sorts of efforts to use all the means available for him when he is going to do any action. Whether it's a fight, whether he's doing the hijrah, whatsoever he's doing, he used all those means that's supposed to be used. So when we talk about victory comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what it means by that is we do the job that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from our end. We use the means, we use the right methodology that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained on us. And then, of course, the victory comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody disagrees with that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives a victory whoever He wishes. So, but when it comes to the means, we have to use you have to utilize the means because that's the part of the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're not trying to come up with our own things. So every action we undertake that has its own merit, that has its own value, that you try to seek with an action that you're undertaking. When you are praying, you are trying to reach the value of an action, which is the spirituality, which is the ruhaniyah. When you are working, well, you work hard to get a financial gain, a financial materialistic value. Yes, you act according to commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it is the salah that we do for spirituality, ruhaniyah, or when we work to gain financial gains, or when we do humanitarian work. When we're doing humanitarian work, the purpose should be because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us to do that humanitarian work. That's why we do that. We don't do humanitarian work to gain some political gains. It should be done because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this, to save the life. Unfortunately, today, it has become, this whole thing, humanitarian work has become, so this is a channel to be used so I can go and raise my party's name and so show that, look, how much donations that we were able to gather and give to the people who are under the flood of Pakistan, for example. And then hence, they can be successful in the next election. Allah knows the best about their intentions, but when they're saying it very clearly, like this, that because we are doing all this thing, hence we are the one who's worthy of winning the elections. So we are mixing the values which should not be mixed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like an action that is done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you're seeking something else other than that. That is considered as shirk, because we are trying to do the ibadah of Allah, but we are trying to do something else, some other gains at the same time. We're trying to make partners, other people, or other things we're trying to achieve out of it. So I kind of digress from the subject because there's something going on these days, and I had to address that. But connecting back to Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu's life, here what we see is he is making all sorts of utilizing all the means here. So he is planning who are the people who should be leading the army. He's planning who are the people who should be distracting the army of the Persian. And then after that, he is instructing the governors to mobilize the people, and was able to gather about 30,000 Muslims, Muslim soldiers to fight against the Persian at that time. Now, while they were doing this, what they found, the Muslims were in a situation. The Persian army, they isolated themselves. They gathered in the Hawan, but they were in the fortresses. And then they also dug up the trenches. And they dug up the trenches, and in the trenches they have spikes. So you cannot enter into the trenches and cross and go towards the walls or enter into those fortresses. Now, the Muslims, they had to do something. So now here, Tulhiyya ibn Khuwaylid al-Asadi, remember this name. This is the same person who was a false prophet, and he returned back to Islam. And he fought many battles afterwards, to prove that his deen became pure after he entered back in Islam. But of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafurur Rahim. Anybody who has done anything, even to the point of, look, this person was calling himself as a false prophet, and he returned back to Islam. So the doors of the maghfirah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are always open for us. So no matter whatever we have done in our lives, we should always go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is Ghafurur Rahim, and Allah will forgive us, inshallah. Now, so here, Tulaiha, he's the one who said that the Muslim cavalry, they should move forward and start a fight with the Persians. How? They should go towards the walls and start provoking them. And while they were provoking them, so their army start coming out. Now they start coming. When they start coming, Muslims did the trick. Or they made the planning, the plot against the fight, because we understand in the when we talk about the battle, the battle is a khuda'. Khuda' is deception. War is deception. In the war, deception is allowed. So now in that case, what they did, the Muslims, they sent a small portion of the army in the front as a cavalry who was provoking and trying to let the army out. When they came out, portion of the army which was under under the Amir, which is Nu'man, radiallahu an, he had another bigger army that was hiding, camouflaging. And when they came out, they attacked along with the cavalry. And then the bigger army, then the one that was under An-Nu'man, that was behind him camouflaging as well. So anybody who was able to pass the first two rows of the armies, they were caught by the others. Now that caused some sort of chaos in the army of the Persians. Now they wanted to retrieve. When they're trying to retrieve their own khandaq or the trenches, that became a problem for them. And many of them fell inside them. And Muslims were able to open an Nahawand as well, even though they had 150,000 soldiers over there. But their own tricks of khandaq that they dug up was used against them, even though that was for them to be protected. But when they crossed the khandaq, the trenches, and the way the Muslims distributed the army, that helped the Muslims to beat the army of 150,000, because they were not expecting the attack from the Muslims will come in this fashion. It was they were kind of, I would call them, they were tricked. There's a word you want to use, that's fine. It doesn't matter with whatever terminology that we use. Now, here, but by the way, before they came out, just to let you know, there was a siege happened. So the siege happened for a few days, and the Muslims were not able to do anything. And this is a trick. This is the idea that Tulayha gave, because of which Muslims were able to pull the army of the Persians outside of the castle. Now here. Umar al-Khattab radiallahu an, what he did for the Ma'arakatul Nahawand was he followed the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did for Mota. Mota was the battlefield that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent Zayd bin al-Haritha radiallahu an as the flag carrier, or as the leader of the army. And the instructions were given at that time: if Zayd is martyred, then the second person in line will be Ja'far bin Abi Talib radiallahu anh. And if he is martyred as well, then the third person who will take over will be Abdullah bin Rawaha radiallahu anh. And if he is also martyred, then it was left to the army to select their own leader. And at that time, as we know, the Sahaba at that time, they selected Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh as the leader, and that was the fight against the Romans. And the Muslims had about 3,000 soldiers against the army of 100,000. And as one of the reports talk about, there's another 100,000 were on the way to join. And Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh was able to save the army in a manner that the Romans at that time, they actually pulled themselves out because the scenario he created. And at that time, Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh was able to retreat them, and they will save those Muslims' lives at that time. And the situation that he was in, it is considered as something which is allowed. Okay, but in this battle, to let you know, Al-Qaqa ibn Amr radiallahu anh is the one who was, when all this chaos was happening and the armies were retrieving, he's the one who followed Al-Fayrazan, the leader of the army, and he was able to kill Al-Fayrazan in this battlefield. Now, in the battle, another thing that was done by Nu'man was Nu'man radiallahu anh, he sent some of the Sahaba ahead of the army first to collect the information about the army of the Persians. This is another important aspect of how the battle was fought. So he sent Tulayha ibn Khuwaylid, Amr ibn Abi Salma, and Ammar ibn Ma'di Yakrib. These three were sent in a faster speed. They were ahead of them. As the report talks about, 20, they were 20 plus farsakh ahead of the rest of the army. Farsakh is a unit of miles that the Persians used to use, which was one farsakh was 3.5 miles. So 20 plus miles is equivalent to about 70 miles or so. So they were about 70 miles ahead of the rest of the army. So they would go fast and then come back and get the news to the Muslims. So Muslims are ready and they are aware of what kind of a fight that they're going to have. So I'm just trying to cover it up, wrap it up to understand that it was not just simply the Muslims went there and the siege and that they won. No, there was a lot of preparation was around it, and this is how the Muslims were collecting the information. Now, Nu'man radiallahu anh, he was one of those people who was martyred in this battle. And Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, when he found out about that, so he said, verily to Allah, he said, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. Verily to Allah, we belong and we return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he cried, he grieved, and asked about the other shuhada of that battle. And the names were given. And then some of the names, he did not recognize the names were given. You have to understand, we're talking about the army of 30,000 that was collected from many areas. And Omar was not even been to those areas even yet. So now about that, when he heard the name that he did not recognize, he said, those are the weak and oppressed among the Muslims, but the one who has honored them with the Shahada knows their faces and lineages. And what does it matter whether Omar knows them or not? So he is not trying to show like, how come Omar doesn't know? Omar is putting himself in the right place. And he's saying it does not matter Omar knows their name or lineages or not. Allah knows their faces. Allah knows their lineages, the one matters. It doesn't matter Omar knows them. So this is how he mentioned it. Now, when the Nahawan was open, there was, they found over there also the chests filled with precious jewels, gems, and that were given to Umar al-Khattab. So they found two big chests. So Hudayfa, radiallahu anh, he sent a commander, he was a commander of armies, so he sent them to Umar, these chests, with one of the commanders. His name was Sa'ib ibn al-Aqra. When he brought them to him, so Umar al-Khattab said, put them into the Baytul Mal. They put them into Baytul Mal, and then he sets off, he turned back. Now, Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, he was going back to Kufa. So when Umar saw him, because what happened was, Umar went to sleep and he saw a dream. And because of the dream, he asked him to go get him back. So when Umar saw him, he said, what is this that you brought to me? Because he said, on the night that you departed, I dreamt that all night that the angels were dragging me to these chests that were filled with fire. Even though it was gems and jewels, which was talking about a lot of wealth was brought to Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh. He said those angels were dragging me there to the fire and warning me that they would brand me with fire if I did not share them out. SubhanAllah. Now Umar al-Khattab said, take them away and set them and sell them and buy provisions for the Muslims. He did not want to even take any part of that gems and the jewels that came from Al-Nahawan. And he sold them and made sure that it has been distributed among the Muslims. Okay, after the Battle of Nahawan, the Persians, this was basically, as I mentioned, it is considered as Fath al-Futuh, which is the conquest of the conquest, many victories, because this was like a final nail in the Persian Empire. Many of the areas like Hamdan, Tabristan, and Isfahan, they actually came to the Muslims for the peace treaty. But we find later on, Hamdan, they broke the treaty. And the Muslims went there and they were able to conquer the Hamdan again. Now, that happened in 21st, after Hijrah was Nahawan. Now, Hamdan was opened in 22nd year after Hijrah. Similarly, Ray is a famous city even today in Iran. That was also open in the 22nd year after Hijrah. And then the Qums, Jurjan, Azerbaijan, they were all open in the 22nd year after Hijrah. Similarly, Al-Bab is another city, was also open in 27th year after Hijrah. Now, there was another area which many of us probably hear about it because and many of us are from India and Pakistan, which is called Makran. Makran was open in the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. It was open, and at that time, when they came back, which is called a Sindh also, the ruler of Sindh was fought again. He was fighting against the Muslims. Muslims opened their land, and they were asked. Umar al-Khattab asked them, "What is this Makran area like?" They explained to him about Makran. The food is bad. The area is barren. Water is not available. And we know that even today, the area is considered this way. But Allah has blessed that region also now with many, many minerals, many kind of minerals, many kind of natural resources. We know this whole area of Balochistan, for example, including Sindh. It is filled with resources. Allah has blessed the land with so much resources. Unfortunately, the kind of rulers we have, they are just using those resources for only their own benefits. Recently, not long ago, in Balochistan, they found the resources of $500 billion worth of gold. Sindh has the second largest coal resources in Thar. What's the name of the place? Sui, where they have the natural gas resources. One of the largest in the world. It is, and we know that where the gas is there, when you say natural gas, then petroleum is there as well. So there's a lot of resources Allah has blessed. But at that time, and Muslims were not after that, but the area was barren and all those things. Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu at that time stopped the continuation of the army to go further in that direction. Again, if you remember, it's not the issue of the resources the Muslims were after. Even the Zarghus mountains and the Muslims stopped. It was more to stabilize what you have. You want to make sure people learn about Islam. People will gain the knowledge of Islam. They can see what Islam is about, and they can see the stability that Islam provides. And we see that the Muslims came under the fold of Islam because of many of the people they came into the fold of Islam because of when they saw the justice of Islam. And then after that, the campaign towards the Turks was started in the 22nd year of Hijrah, and so is towards the Khurasan area, and the Muslims started moving in that direction as well. That includes the conquest of there's an area called Istakhar, which is 23rd year of Hijrah. Conquest of there's an area called Karman, Sajistan, that also in 23rd year of Hijrah, and so was Makran, was also 23rd year of the Hijrah. And then the campaign against the Kurds were also started in the 23rd year of Hijrah, and that was pretty much back to back, as you can see. 22nd year of the Hijrah, Nahawan was open. By the time of the 23rd year of Hijrah, all those areas that start from Iraq further east, even come to the borders of Pakistan as well. They were open in the time of Umar al-Khattab within a year period of time, because after that, Persian Empire was not able to fight back against the Muslims in any powerful manner. So that's what about was the Iraq and the east of Iraq. Inshallah, next week we will start how the conquest of the Roman Empire or the Syria started in the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. So that was it as far as the conquest of Iraq and the areas east of Iraq was. Inshallah, we'll stop today's session here. And if there is any questions or comments